Let's see. It looks like the sound is working. Okay, good. Now I understand why all YouTubers say before they start, let's make sure the sound's working. So we'll pause, we'll say our prayer, and then we'll pass out the handout for tonight. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. O heavenly King, comfort of the Spirit of truth, word of present, fills all things, the treasury of good things and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every stain, and save our souls with good life. Amen. Tonight, we are going to spend the evening discussing two different empires that you probably never learned about in high school, two different patriarchates that you probably didn't know existed for hundreds of years, and Saint Sava, who you've all probably heard of. So what I have here is a handout. This is the first royal dynasty of Serbia, the Nemanja dynasty, which Saint Sava is a part of this dynasty. And so I will hand them off, and it's my own little spreadsheet. So we'll go through it once we get to there. So one of the reasons I've been wanting to do this whole series, so that we know, in a sense, how do we get to our present circumstances? And in the case of our present circumstances, for many, we feel like everything has kind of been thrown up in the air, and we don't know where things are going to settle. Civilization and life is very chaotic and uncertain. And so to understand how do we get to this point of kind of chaotic existence, it's good to look back to know where we came from, but also it's important that that these periods of kind of chaos, of when things feel like they've been thrown up in the air and you don't know where the foundation is, and that this is not a unique event in history, that this has happened before, and that the moments of such chaos are opportunities to be able to look at the present circumstances with maybe a different perspective. Because things are all thrown up, you have the ability to kind of see things from a different perspective, and maybe see things in a way you didn't see them before, or understand your circumstances in a way you didn't see them before, and that understanding is of a benefit for going forward. So one of those periods we've already talked about last week was the time of the Crusades, specifically the Fourth Crusade for the Roman Empire based in Constantinople, because the Crusaders conquered the capital city of Constantinople, and that threw that empire into chaos, and that continued for a number of years. And we're still, for tonight's lecture, we're in the same time period, except we're looking at a slightly different part of the world. Last week, we were talking about Constantinople here. Hope you can make out my map. The Black Sea, Mediterranean, there's Italy. We have Rome, of course, over here. Constantinople over here. And the Crusaders came through from Western Europe, sometimes through the Balkans, and that's the subject for tonight, through the Balkans to Constantinople and then to Asia. Constantinople sits right on the edge of Europe next to Asia. You cross the strait and you're in Asia. And so the empire was centered on this city, and when it was lost, the empire fractured, and you had one power base over in what is modern day Greece, another based in Nicaea, which is over in this part of modern day Turkey, as well as the Latin Empire of Constantinople. And all of this is going on in the midst of, for tonight, the Balkan people. People in what we call the Balkan area, from Greece coming up the Balkan Peninsula between the Black Sea and I always forget this, the Adriatic. The Adriatic Sea, the Aegean Sea. Let's do that again. The Adriatic Sea is between Italy and what is the Balkans Peninsula. The Aegean Sea is between Greece and modern-day Turkey. The Black Sea is between Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, down to Georgia, and the northern coast of Turkey. So these are the three major body of waters that we're kind of operating around. So we do geography in this too, kind of try to be well-rounded people, right? So the Balkan Peninsula is what we're talking about. It was in the early Roman period. It was made up into two dioceses. Remember, diocese is the name for basically like a province or a state with the Roman Empire. So the diocese of Illyricum in Dacia or Dacia. By the 6th century, Slavic tribes had immigrated from the north. So you have, we'll quiz you here, which is the big river running kind of east to west, or west to east actually, and draining into the Black Sea? Well, let's ask the 9-year-old. Paul?
I just forgot it.
Oh. Okay, anyone? Anyone? The Danube. And the Danube, as a piece of trivia, is one of the 4 rivers, is understood to be one of the 4 rivers that flow from Eden. Right? You all know the Tigris and the Euphrates, and then they list 2 others. The tradition is the other 2 is the Danube and the Nile, are the other 2 rivers. They have different names in Genesis, but those are the rivers. So those are the 4 main tributary rivers in this part of the world. So from the north, crossing the Danube, the Slavic tribes came. The Avars came from Central Asia over here, off the map. The Bulgars also came from Central Asia, and the Magyars, who are the Hungarians, came from Central Asia, all migrating into this area. The Slavic tribes in the 6th century, the Avars in the 7th, the Bulgarians in the 8th, and the Magyars in the 9th. And then you have a 5th group, the Vlachs. Anybody know who the Vlachs are? We have some in our parish. It's not a derogatory term. Kevin? Romanians. It's an old name for Romania, or Romanians, the Vlachs. We'll cover them in another lecture. But they're also, Bucharest is the modern day capital of Romania. And so they're also present here. But they are a Latin speaking people. So they go back they were here before all these other groups show up, the Vlachs. Of course, we covered the work of Cyril and Methodius in the 9th century, converting the Slavic peoples to Christianity and giving them a written language. So we have a little review. Khan Boris of Bulgaria sought a path to Christianity for his people, himself being baptized in 860. He wanted to establish an independent church in Bulgaria. He looked both to Rome and Constantinople, first inviting missionaries from Constantinople, then expelling them after not receiving, in a sense, a self-governing church separate from Constantinople. He invited missionaries from Rome and then expelled them and brought missionaries from Constantinople back. He did not gain an autocephalous church, but in the end, he chose ecclesiastical union with Constantinople. Saints Clement and Naum, which is Naum, both end up going to Bulgaria, and they reside in Ohrid. Ohrid is a lake, as well as a city or a place. And this is roughly where it is in the Balkan Peninsula. It becomes a center of Slavic Christianity, and Clement in 893 is consecrated the first bishop of Bulgaria. He is the first Slav bishop. He dies in 916. Both Clement and Naum founded monasteries in the Kingdom of Bulgaria. That first Kingdom of Bulgaria lasted from 681 to 1018. It's a good time span, lifespan for an empire. Boris himself left the throne in 889 to become a monk. So it was an empire, a non-Christian, a pagan empire first, and then as an empire became Christian, just like the Roman Empire. Boris left the throne in 889, and he left the throne to become a monk, which becomes somewhat of a pattern for kings in this area. He founded a monastery in Preslav. His son Vladimir, under boyar pressure, entered an alliance with King Arnulf of Bavaria, and the church is persecuted at this time period, and the archbishop was imprisoned, and then Boris comes back out from the monastery. He deposes his son Vladimir and gives the throne to his younger son Simeon, who had been a monk. Simeon had been a monk, but now he's made the czar, the emperor. Stability for society returned, including the church. Simeon prioritized the Slavic language in the church, and the Cyrillic alphabet is developed in place of the Glagolitic. We've covered this in a previous lecture, just to review. And there's a boom in architecture, specifically of the style of St. Justinian's time period, which is at the 6th century. And it's at this time that Simeon establishes the first Patriarchate of Bulgaria. Now, Bulgaria, the Bulgarian Empire, very much kind of took up a lot of this area here on the Balkan Peninsula, and would vary in size and put pressure on Constantinople that kind of wrapped around here, or sometimes made its way to the coast here. But Thessalonica, in the time of Cyril and Methodius, was surrounded by Slavic peoples at this time. And so a little geography. Athens is here. Thessalonica is here. It sits northwest of a lesser peninsula that has 3 fingers to it. The top finger is what is called Mount Athos. Mount Athos is a mountain at the very end of this peninsula, very tall mountain, and the ridge line of the mountain kind of follows back down the peninsula. And on either side of that ridge, are on the coast, on the edge, largely of that peninsula, are where the monasteries of Mount Athos are built. And so it's rather kind of a steep peninsula. It flattens out as it gets closer to the mainland, but more steep as it gets to the mountain itself. And that's why Mount Athos has its name. Constantinople, of course, is here. We've already talked about Ohrid, but Trnovo is also going to become important for Bulgaria. It becomes the capital. But then Studenica will be an important city or important monastery in the life of St. Sava. And then I give you where Belgrade, Sofia, and Bucharest are. It's the cities of the modern era. So you kind of have a reference of the places we're talking about, where they are. So In 971, the Patriarch of Bulgaria was reduced to the title of Archbishop after Emperor John Zimiscus was victorious over the Bulgarians. Eventually, the Archbishop of Bulgaria began to reside in Ohrid. So he moved his episcopal see to Ohrid. When Basil II, the Roman Emperor of Constantinople, Basil II, also went to war with the Bulgarians, his nickname is the Bulgar Slayer because he killed so many. He subjected their territory under his throne. So Constantinople was under Basil II, this is 1018, was able to reassert Roman imperial power back through the Balkans, even up to the Danube, and so forth, throughout this whole area. He recognized, though, the Archbishop of Ohrid as the successor of the Bulgarian Patriarch under Emperor Simeon in the 9th century. The Archbishop maintained his autocephaly, or his self-rule, from Constantinople. His territory remained the area once under the Bulgarian Patriarchate, which included Greek-speaking areas and areas populated by Vlachs, Romanians, and Magyars, Hungarians. This also included what would become Serbia. The archbishop, though, would be appointed by the emperor directly. This archbishopric would survive in one form or another until 1767. So this ecclesiastical structure, the archbishopric of Ohrid, lasts almost to the founding of the United States. But in 1767, it was reincorporated unilaterally into the Patriarchate of Constantinople. Bulgaria would then, in 1870, claim to only be reestablishing its autocephalous church when it broke away from Constantinople in that year and resumed to function as a self-governing church. Before all of this, though, going back to the time of Justinian in the 6th century, Justinian was born in this area around Ohrid. And as emperor, he established an independent archbishopric called Justiniana Prima, or First Justinian, in the place of his birth. This is in 535, he does this. It disappears in the 7th century, but its territory closely matched that of the Archbishopric of Ohrid. Thus, the Archbishop of Ohrid would quickly claim the title of Justiniana Prima to support its right. And so the archbishops of Ohrid would refer to themselves as the archbishops of Ohrid and Justiniana Prima, as this kind of jurisdiction of this area. In 1185, you have the establishment of a second Bulgarian Empire. This second Bulgarian Empire would last until 1422, another long span. Under a second Bulgarian Empire, a patriarchate was established now in Trnovo. This was not recognized by Constantinople until 1235. In 1195, the relics of St. John of Rila were translated to Trnovo. St. John of Rila was the first Bulgarian hermit. He was revered as a saint while he was still alive, and there are legends surrounding him that tell of wild animals that freely came up to him and birds that landed in his hands, like many monastic saints. His followers founded many churches in his honor, including the famous Rila Monastery. And one of these churches, St. John of Rila, was only discovered in 2008 in the town of Veliko Trnovo. Today, he is honored as the patron saint of Bulgaria. of Bulgarians and is one of the most important saints of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. So he lived 880 to 946. And so his relics were taken to the capital of Trnovo, kind of that movement, of moving the relics of the saint to the capital, right? In a sense, placing him as the patron saint of the empire. And some of the information on St. John of Rila was courtesy of Wikipedia.
Autocephalous church, does that mean, are they still in communion with the rest of the church? Okay.
Auto, meaning self, kephali, or cephaly, like cephalopods. Cephaly is your head. Self-headed. So nobody is the head of you. It's kind of what it literally means. And so the Bulgarians unilaterally established this, and it's only later that Constantinople acknowledged this in 1235. There were 16 successive patriarchs of Trnovo until its conquest by the Ottomans in 1393. And so that's, in a sense, how we get the Archbishopric of Ohrid and a separate Patriarchate of Trnovo. So we're going to flip the board here so we can keep all this stuff straight. So we have two Bulgarian empires, and I give you the dates there. And then we have the Archbishopric of Ohrid, which we've discussed, and the Patriarchate of Trnovo, because we have to know all of this to understand then what happened. How do we get Serbia? Which we get Serbia because of St. Sava. And what I'm going to, the information that follows now, some of it is adapted from the Lives of the Saints for St. Sava on oca.org. Much of the information I've taken from that. And I've also taken some of it is from the book I've been using, The Christian East and the Rise of the Papacy by Aristides Papadakis in collaboration with Father John Meyendorff. So I'll read a few things from here as well as some inspiration by my own patron saint, St. Nikolai Velimirovich, Archbishop of Zicha. Remember that name, Zicha. It'll be referenced again. St. Nikolai is a bishop of the Serbian Orthodox Church of the 20th century. So his many volumes that are in English, the first volume is a treasure of Serbian Orthodox spirituality, which he discusses St. Sava and the many saintly kings of Serbia, which I've listed all the kings that were saints, as well as St. Sava, of this specific dynasty. And that's what your handout shows, is how they're related to each other. And as we go through it, we'll look at this for reference. So St. Sava is the first Archbishop of Serbia. In the world, he was born Radoslav or Rasko. So on your handout, you see the very top, you see the name St. Stefan Nemanja. This is St. Sava's father. St. Sava is the second son on the second tier, along with his brothers, St. Stefan the First Crowned and Vukan, Grand Prince of Serbia. St. Stefan Nemanja was Grand Prince of Serbia from 1166 to 1196. But his son, Rasko, was also the son of Anna, daughter of the Byzantine Emperor Romanus. So we should call it the Roman Empire of Constantinople. The Roman Emperor in Constantinople, Romanos, had married his daughter off to the Grand Prince of Serbia, Saint Stefan Nemanja, and she was the mother of Saint Sava. So we'll hear about her as well as we go. At the age of 17, Rasko met a monk from Mount Athos. Secretly, he left his father's house and set off for the monastery of St. Panteleimon. This monastery, in 1169, which was the year of the saint's birth, had been given over to the care of Russian monks on Mount Athos. So if we flip back to our map, again, Mount Athos is here. On the southern edge of the peninsula, towards the middle, is where St. Panteleimon's monastery is. It, at this time, was, and still is today, is the Slavic, one of two Slavic monasteries. The second being Hilandar, which is on the north side, the northwest side of the peninsula, becomes the Serbian monastery. This is the Russian monastery. There are 20 total of Mount Athos, most of which are already established at this time, and many of which are Greek-speaking. One, at the time, Aviron was dedicated to Georgian monks from the country of Georgia. There was also, at the time, a Benedictine monastery on Mount Athos in the early years, before the schism and after the schism, right? Because the schism is this fluid thing. That at this time, communion had not yet been broken totally. And so you had Benedictine monks after 1054 living on Mount Athos. So Roscoe goes to Panteleimon, St. Panteleimon, and his father finds out he's on Athos, and he mobilizes his retainers and headed by a faithful voivode, or an official, and he wrote to the governor of the district, which includes Athos, saying that if his son was not returned to him, he would go to war against the Greeks. When they arrived at the monastery, the voivode, or this kind of official from the Grand Prince, was ordered to not take his eyes off of Roscoe. During the evening services, though, when the soldiers had fallen asleep under the influence of wine, Roscoe received the monastic tonsure, this is in the year 1186, and sent his parents his worldly clothes, his hair, because a tonsure is the cutting of the hair, and a letter. St. Sava sought to persuade his powerful parents to become monastics, both mother and father. And this is what they actually chose to do. The Grand Prince of Serbia chose to become a monk, taking the name of Simeon. We'll flip back to our dynastic chart here. St. Stephan the Manja is St. Simeon, the Myrgusher. His feast day is February 13th. He and his son ended up pursuing asceticism, the monastic life, at Vatopedi Monastery. His mother, Anna, became a nun with the name of Anastasia, and her feast day, because she is also a saint, is June 21st. On Athos, they established the Serbian monastery of Hilandar, and this monastery received its name by imperial grant in 1199. St. Simeon, the former king, would die in the same year. At Hilandar Monastery, St. Sava was ordained to the diaconate and then the presbytery to become a priest. For his holy life and virtuous deeds on Mount Athos, the monk was made an archimandrite in the city of Thessalonica. In 1207, St. Sava returned to Serbia with his father's relics. This marked St. Sava's involvement in the political affairs of the Serbian nation. For a time, he was abbot of Studenica Monastery. So we go back. Studenica is up here, kind of towards the north of Serbia. Belgrade's further north, so I guess it would be this kind of the center of what is modern-day Serbia. Studenica is a monastery founded by his father. There is a long tradition of the royalty of Serbia founding monasteries during their reigns, and sometimes some of them made it a point to found a church, to have a church built for every year of their reign. That's how many of the churches in Serbia are built. And this is different than in the West. It's built by the monarchy, but it's controlled by the clergy. It's not the same system as in the West, where the local lords owned the church, controlled it, and chose who the bishops and the abbots were. The church retained that authority. The kings, in a sense, donated the construction of the church to the church and to the people. And then the church took care of it. So, and then the kings themselves half the time became monks. For a time, he was abbot at Studenica Monastery, founded by his father, and this is where he buried his father's relics. And it is said that when he would go to cense the coffin, the crypt of his father, myrrh would gush from it. That's why he's called the myrrh gusher. There's a number of myrrh-gushing kingly saints of Serbia. Even to this day, their tombs will emit myrrh. His brothers were the heads of two separate parts of, in a sense, Serbian principalities that would become a united kingdom of Serbia. And they were, of course, being brothers, they were at odds with each other. Stefan the First Crown being one of them, and on your handout, you see the other two, or the other one. You have Stefan Radislav, or Stefan the First Crown, Grand Prince of Serbia, his dates 1196 to 1202, and then King of Serbia, 1204 to 1217. 1217 to 1228. His brother Vukan drives, in a sense, his brother out of power between 1202 and 1204. But after 1204, as we'll hear, he comes back. This is where we're at on this kind of family tree chart here. We're still towards the top. Vukan, who led what was called Zeta, the Principality of Zeta, allied himself with King Emmerich of Hungary and accepted the authority of the Pope, placing the church in his territory under the Pope, under the ecclesiastical power of the Bishop of Rome. Vukan then drove his brother Stefan of Raska. Raska was the other principality. So you have the Principality of Zeta and Raska, Stefan of Raska. He's driven from power for several years, but then the Bulgarians, see, they're still there. The Bulgarians bring him back into power. Saint Sava worked to try to reconcile the two brothers. A peace agreement allowed that Zeta was to remain under the Pope, under the jurisdiction of the Pope. And Saint Sava and Stefan requested a crown for Stefan from Honorius III, Pope of Rome, who granted it, sending a cardinal to crown him King of Serbia. And that's why he's called the first crowned. But it's a Roman Catholic cardinal who does it, who crowns him. Sava doesn't crown him. This happens in 1217. When this is going on, Sava leaves Serbia for Mount Athos to establish a new canonical structure for the Church of Raska. So I'm going to read to you from Papadakis' work here. And we'll explain all of this. Why are they going back between the Pope and the Orthodox Church, back and forth here? So, canonically, the Orthodox Diocese of Raska was in the jurisdiction of Demetrios Komatianos, Archbishop of Ohrid, remember? Archbishop of Ohrid. This learned Greek prelate was politically allied with Theodore Angelus, who was the despot of Epirus, whose territory included Ohrid. Theodore's ambition was to secure the Byzantine imperial crown for himself, because remember, at this time, we're past 1204. There is a Latin kingdom of Constantinople, and there is now the despot of Epirus, who's claiming, in a sense, succession of imperial power, and you also have the kingdom of Nicaea making the same claim for the continuation of imperial Roman power. And there was, I think, a third group even, but they don't come into the story. So Theodore, who's the despot of Epirus, this is the mainland of Greece, where he is power base, including Ohrid is, right? This is, in a sense, the area of which the Serbians are kind of a part of. Theodore was a bitter competitor for Serbian power in the Balkans. And the Archbishop of Ohrid was unlikely to support St. Sava's plan for ecclesiastical independence because he was aligned with the despot of Epirus. It is therefore against such a complicated background that one understands the meaning of St. Sava's master stroke, his success in obtaining not from Epirus, not from the despot of Epirus or from the Archbishop of Ohrid, but from the Emperor of Nicaea, Theodore I Lascaris, and Patriarch Manuel I, the status of an independent autocephalous Archbishop of Serbia. Sava doesn't go to his immediate, in a sense, ecclesiastical hierarch. He goes, in a sense, outside of that to the man who claims to be the Patriarch of Constantinople, but who's residing in Nicaea. In a sense, to this other power base that's kind of in competition with the power that he is directly under. So he steps outside of that and gains, in a sense, autonomy, a self-governing archbishopric from the Patriarch in Nicaea and from the Emperor in Nicaea. So everybody follow? It's a little complicated, right? What eventually happens, though, is the despot of Epirus, he loses the power struggle, ultimately. He's reunited with Nicaea, and the emperor in Nicaea is the one who will continue on as the, in a sense, temporal power in this region. And therefore, the decisions that it had made become effective once this reunion occurs. And therefore, the Archbishopric of Serbia remains independent. So at Nicaea in the year 1219, on the feast of the Dormition, the ecumenical patriarch Manuel I consecrated Archimandrite Sava as archbishop of the lands of Serbia and all the lands near the sea. This title included the territory of the Church of Zeta, right? Vukon's area that had been kind of, he'd lost it to Stefan, but the church in Zeta had been allowed to stay under Rome. But what Manuel I does, he combines that whole area within the title of Sava. Now the question is, did he have the authority to do this or not? It doesn't really matter. He did it anyway. And so you have this struggle back and forth again still between the Bishop of Rome and the Bishop of Constantinople, and Sava kind of in the middle, playing, in some sense, playing both sides. They go to Honorius III to receive a crown for the king. Because remember, Honorius III is the Bishop of Rome and the temporal head of the Papal States and the head of all emperors in the West, all kings in the West. So as a temporal head, as a temporal king or monarch, they sought a temporal crown from him, but they did not seek ecclesiastical recognition, because the Bishop of Rome had both at this time. And at this time, too, the Emperor of Constantinople didn't exist in a sense. The Emperor of Constantinople was in exile in Nicaea, or one of the men claiming to be Emperor of Constantinople, Emperor of the Romans, was in Nicaea. Several other claimants existed, right? So there was no clear temporal authority anymore in Constantinople to ask a crown from. But there was a clear temporal authority in Rome that everybody recognized. So if Rome acknowledged you as a king, it kind of confirmed your presence amongst the kings. Does that follow? But then they don't go to Rome, though, for the recognition of an independent archbishopric. They go back to Nicaea, to the man who claims to be the ecumenical patriarch, the successor of the Patriarchs of Constantinople. And from him, they are sanctioned to be an independent autocephalous archbishopric, self-governing. Does it make sense?
Did the emperor from Rome realize they weren't asking him for ecclesiastical authority?
Eventually, well, the Pope. There was no emperor in Rome. The emperor was in Germany from the so-called Holy Roman Empire, the Germanic princes, of which the Pope could depose if he wanted to at this point. Or that was the claim. You think our world's kind of confused, right? It's like things haven't changed. Things are convoluted, you know. Temporal power, right, really makes things complicated, as we see today. It was no different back then. So this title, lands of Serbia and all the lands near the sea, included the territory of the Church of Zeta, which was under Rome. Sava had sought ecclesiastical recognition from the ecumenical patriarch who resided in Nicaea due to the Fourth Crusade, who he was not directly under. The Archbishopric of Ohrid was his immediate ecclesiastical authority, and by receiving an autocephalous status, was shrinking the territory of the Archbishop of Ohrid, who protested to St. Sava in a letter in 1220. Ohrid at the time was under the temporal authority of the despot of Epirus, Theodore Angelus, who did not recognize the emperor or patriarch residing in Nicaea. So this is where we sit. St. Sava, though, would return to his new see by 1224. It took him 4 years to get home, where he established his archdiocese in the great church of Zicha. Do you remember that name? My patron saint, St. Nikolai of Zicha, because he was bishop of Zicha for a time. St. Sava established his episcopal throne in Zicha. The archbishop's seat, though, would be moved to the monastery of Pec. And this is where we will eventually get the Patriarchate of Pec. But that will happen after St. Sava's death in 1253. In Serbia, the activity of the hierarch in organizing the work of his native church was accompanied by numerous signs and miracles. During the liturgy and all-night vigil, when the saint came to sense the grave of his father, the monk Simeon, the holy relics exuded fragrant myrrh. Being in charge of negotiations with the Hungarian king Vladislav, who had declared war on Serbia, the holy bishop not only brought about the desired peace for his country, but he also brought the Hungarian monarch into orthodoxy. Thus, he facilitated the start of the historical existence of the autonomous or self-governing Serbian church. St. Sava also contributed to strengthening the Serbian state. Upon the death of St. Stephen, the first crowned in 1228, his eldest son, Radislav, was crowned king, who had also been married, who he also has married to Anna, daughter of Theodore of Epirus. So remember, Theodore of Epirus is the despot, kind of the rival claimant to be emperor in a sense, of Constantinople. And Sava had done this runaround outside of him to get, in a sense, recognition of the church, as well as kind of temporal authority of the king of Serbia. But St. Sava is able to, in a sense, whatever hard feelings there were, they didn't last. Because he was able to to bring about a union between, in a sense, the despot of Epirus and the king of Serbia by having the despot of Epirus's daughter marry the son of Saint Stephen, who is on our list here. So we look at so it says Stephen the first crowned, Grand Prince of Serbia, father of, and then there's 3 sons, the first being Stefan Radislav, king of Serbia, who follows his father as king. And he's married to Anna, daughter of the despot of Epirus. So there is this temporal union between these 2 powers that St. Sava is able to accomplish, and in a sense, to bring peace to the Balkan Peninsula. Also, he had reconciled with the Archbishop of Ohrid, Demetrius, to the point where Demetrius, now Archbishop of Ohrid, would regularly give advice to the king of Serbia. So whatever hard feelings were there, those went away with the work of St. Sava. And everyone was working together for the common good. Find my place. Here we go. From 1229 to 1230, St. Sava goes on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, visiting Nicaea and Mount Athos on his return. When he returned to his native land, the saint blessed and crowned Vladislav. On our list here, it's the middle son. St. Stephan has 3 sons who are kings. Radislav to 1234, and from 1234 to 1243, his brother, St. Stefan Vladislav, is king of Serbia. And then Stefan Uros I will be king of Serbia from 43 to 76. They're all brothers. And St. Sava crowns Stefan Radislav and St. Stefan Vladislav, another one of the saintly kings listed here of Serbia. To further strengthen the Serbian throne, he betrothed him, Vladislav, to the daughter of the Bulgarian prince, Asan. The Holy Hierarch visited churches all across Serbia. He reformed monastic rules on the models of Athos and Palestine, and he established and consecrated many churches, strengthening the Orthodox in their faith. Having finished his work in his native land, the saint appointed the hieromonk Arsenius as his successor, and he retired. He left his throne. And he consecrated his successor, bishop, giving him his blessing, and he sent off on a final pilgrimage, in a sense, to desiring to the end of his days to be a wanderer in a foreign land. He passed through Palestine, Syria, Persia, Babylon, Egypt, and Anatolia, everywhere visiting the holy places and conversing with the great ascetics and collecting the holy relics of saints. The saint finished his wanderings at Trnovo in Bulgaria, at the home of his kinsman, Asan, where with spiritual joy he gave up his soul to the Lord, January 14th, 1236. At the time of the transfer of the holy relics of St. Sava back to Serbia, this is in 1237, there were so many healings that the Bulgarians were complaining to Asan, quote, because he had given up such a treasure of Sava's body, his relics. In the saint's own country, his venerable relics were placed in the church in Mileševo, bestowing healing on all who approached with faith. The inhabitants of Trnovo continued to receive healing from the remains of the saint's coffin. which Asan ordered to be gathered together and placed in a newly built sarcophagus. So the remains of his coffin were put into a sarcophagus. And people would go and venerate them to be healed. The legacy of St. Sava lives on in the Orthodox Church traditions of the Slavic nations. He is associated with the introduction of the Jerusalem Typicon as the basis for Slavic monastic rules. The Serbian Hilandar Monastery on Mount Athos lives by the Typicon of St. Sava to this day. Editions of the Rudder, a collection of church canons that St. Sava had brought into the Serbian church from Constantinople, is the most widely disseminated in the Russian church, or the Slavic churches. It is then, so back to our timeline here, our family tree, Stefan Uros I becomes king after Saint Stefan Vladislav. He is the father of two kings, Saint Stefan Dragutin and Saint Stefan Uros. Both of his sons are saints. He, though, wasn't declared a saint, but his sons were. That's a good accomplishment. And it's at this time that there's a division between the king of Serbia and the king of northern Serbia, because Saint Stefan Dragutin becomes the king of northern Serbia in 1282, when Saint Stefan Uros II, Milutin, becomes king of Serbia. And then Dragutin, is the father of Stefan Vladislav, the second king of northern Serbia. Saint Stefan Uros is the father then of Saint Stefan Uros III, who's the father of Stefan Uros IV, Dusan, king and emperor of Serbia. So it's under Dusan that you have the emergence of a Serbian empire and the changing from an archbishopric to the Patriarchate of Pec. So it's in the reign of Stefan Dusan, around 1346, the Serbia reached its most expansive territory, and the Archbishop of Pec was elevated to become patriarch, and the king and emperor, Dusan taking the title emperor and autocrat of the Serbian and Romanian people. Patriarch of Pec was immediately recognized by the Patriarch of Trnovo, the Archbishop of Ohrid, and the monasteries of Mount Athos. As you've seen, the monasteries of Mount Athos had a very strong relationship, not just with what we think of as the Greek-speaking world, but the Slavic-speaking world at this point. And they quickly recognized the Patriarchate of Pec. The Patriarch of Constantinople, though, did not. Callistos, in 1349, Patriarch of Constantinople, anathematized the whole Serbian church. This did not last necessarily very long, and this was undone in 1371. And I'll read to you another section here from Papadakis. And this will be the last section. We might end under an hour. So this emergence of the Patriarchate of Pec became a problem in ecclesiastical affairs. That problem was solved, though, following the disastrous defeat of the Serbs by the armies of Sultan Murad I on the river Miritsa in 1371. The role of intermediary was played by a delegation of Slavic monks from Mount Athos, including the abbot of the Russian monastery, Isaiah, and Nicodemus, a relative of Prince Lazar of Serbia. The presence of another former Athonite, Philotheos, on the throne of Constantinople must have helped matters greatly. Receiving the monks in Constantinople, Patriarch Philotheos sent his own plenipotentiaries to Serbia, his own representatives. The monks Matthew and Moses, who solemnly lifted the anathemas against Dusan, standing at his tomb in Prizren. They also concelebrated with the Serbian clergy in Pek and announced the recognition of Sava IV as Patriarch of Serbia. So at this point, in 1371, Constantinople recognizes the Patriarchate of Pek. The several Serbian principalities that emerged from the defeat in 1371 were conquered successively by the Turks. The famous Battle of Kosovo in 1389, during which the Sultan Murad I was killed by a Serbian warrior, and Prince Lazar was taken prisoner to be executed, together with other Serbian nobles, by Murad's son and successor, Bayezid I, was the last tragically unsuccessful attempt at stopping the Turkish advance. However, the Serbian despots Stefan Lazarević and George Branković, being Turkish vassals, were still able to patronize arts and culture. And Stefan Lazarević, was able to rule from 1389 to 1427, and George Branković from 1427 to 1456. Finally, in 1459, Sultan Mehmed II, this is after the conquest of Constantinople, suppressed the last vestiges of Serbian autonomy. The Serbian Patriarchate of Pek survived, though, under the Turks until 1766, when it was formally suppressed, as was also the autocephalous Archbishopric of Ohrid by the Ecumenical Patriarch Samuel I, and Greek bishops were appointed the Serbian sees. So all of these survive roughly into the 17th century as patriarchates or independent archbishoprics. And once we get to the 18th century, then we'll talk about what's going on there. But in the mid 1450s, this is when, back to the map, the Turkish forces conquer Constantinople, as well as spread out through all the Balkan Peninsula. And it's then that you get the emergence of Muslim populations, which in our day concentrate in Albania, Bosnia, Herzegovina at the moment, as well as in Kosovo. It's the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, which is so important to the Serbian people as one of kind of the defining moments of their history, because Kosovo is where the monastery of Pek is. It is, in a sense, the heartland of Serbian national identity and ecclesiastical identity is in Kosovo. The patriarchs are still crowned, or not crowned, but the patriarchs are, in a sense, enthroned still at the monastery of Pek. But currently, Kosovo has attempted to break away because a large percentage of the population is ethnic Albanians who have moved into the area, and in the Bosnian, the Balkan Wars of the late 90s, Yugoslavia, or what was Yugoslavia, which contained Serbia, Macedonia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, broke apart in 1992, and then the remainders of it, right? The part that remained Yugoslavia, being Macedonia, Serbia, and Montenegro, which sits on the coast, was on the side of the war that we bombed. We supported the Bosnians in that war, And so gets into modern day politics, but in a sense, the Balkan Peninsula becomes much more complicated with the Turks coming in and establishing a strong Muslim community, and those kind of tensions have continued to this day, but they're localized, right? The populations are very much localized. So Albania and Bosnia are the places that have the strong Muslim populations. Croatia, though, which is up here, is the only part of the Balkans that's Catholic. So by and large, you have Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, and Bulgaria, Romanian, and Greece. These are all Orthodox countries, and they get along fairly well with one another. But because of the dynamics of modern political struggle, the Balkans have been rather unstable for a number of reasons, but those ethnic tensions being exacerbated by internal and external forces have resulted in a lot of tragedy there, unfortunately. And Kosovo is one of those places. In a sense, because NATO chose the side of the Kosovo Albanians versus the side of the Kosovo Serbians. But the Serbians, right, this is the homeland of their civilization. So that's why even right now, there's so much tension in Kosovo because of this. Because ancient monasteries reside within that territory of Kosovo. And there is a large Serbian minority, but the majority is Albanian. And so the Albanians want to break away and kind of join with Albania, but the Serbians don't want to let it go. So that's why we see so much trouble there, which resembles other places in the world. So, fortunately. But that's the history of the Balkans up until roughly 1450s and a little bit afterwards. Little overview so you understand what's going on even now. Questions?
Father, do you know if the letter that St. Sava wrote to his father is still survived to read? Or?
I don't know. I don't know if we have that letter. Be nice if we did.
I'd like to see what he said that convinced him of fantastic.
Yeah. Other questions? No. The one more note. Because of the upheaval of the Fourth Crusade and the fracturing of the Roman Empire in Constantinople, everything was kind of tossed up in the air. A great instability. St. Sava is trying to establish stability for his people, the Serbian people. And one of the reasons he was able to do that was because the patriarchs of Constantinople in Nicaea understood humbly their situation, that they could no longer assert their authority because they had a strong imperial empire that they were supported by. They understood that that was fractured and weak. And so it's at this point that the patriarchs of Constantinople are much more willing to acknowledge, in a sense, the need of self-governance in places and acknowledge that and work with them, which changes, in a sense, the dynamic of the ecclesiastical structure of the church for hundreds of years. And I would say for the better. Because the people, you have this strong Christian identity to the Serbian people that lasts, that still is prevalent to this day. If you ask a Serbian person, are they a Christian? They'll likely tell you yes, and that they're Orthodox. But this is rooted,
That they're Serbian.
Serbian Orthodox, but Yeah, but that's that's how they identify. To be Serbian is to be an Orthodox Christian. And to be Bulgarian is to be largely Orthodox Christian as well. You have this strong, but that is that kind of sense of who we are as a people is allowed to flourish because the patriarchs of Constantinople recognize, in a sense, they can't just throw their weight around anymore because they don't have any weight anymore. They recognize the change of dynamic, and they humbly accepted that and worked to facilitate the stability of the church without the stability of the empire. And in some sense, you could say the stability of the church became greater at that time, even though the stability of the empire lessened. So, thank you. And next week, I can't even remember what we're covering. But we will reconvene. God bless you all.